Hey guys, this is your High Fist here with the juiciest of all videos. We are here with the creator, guys, the legend himself, the man in whose blood Malas tube sort of swims. If Ericsson is God, he is Jesus. If Ericsson's Allah, he is
Oh my
Muhammad.
God.
If Ericsson's Vishnu, he is Krishna. And if Ericsson's a vaguely defined philosophical concept, he's the Buddha, right? So I'm more importantly, guys, the reason he's here is because he is my good friend, Iskar Jarak. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I totally disapprove of that whole introduction, but this is my actual favorite channel on all of YouTube. So just absolute pleasure to weasel my way onto your channel. Thanks so much for having me.
So some of my subscribers might not know this because I think I've only mentioned this on your channel. So guys, I get a lot of comments here and there talking about the sort of the Ruth and Bad name and all that. So the person who named me, the reason there's a name called Ruth and Bad and a channel called Ruth and Bad is because of the handsome man that you see to my either left or right here. I'm not too sure how it turns out when we actually upload this, but Ishka named me Ruth and Bad. It was a play on my real name. I would always use different names while I was on his Discord server. I would be Tuhol, Quick Ben, Baukalane, Pearl, whatever. And Ishka one day just changed my name to Ruth and Bad. And for some reason, it just stuck. For some reason, everybody agreed that it fit my Discord shenanigans. Yeah. And this is way before there was any talk of me ever starting my own YouTube channel or whatever. And Ishka was the
like
one
50 subscribers in.
Yeah. This was, you had about 40 or 50. And the reason I am the High Fist, guys, so this is another bit of trivia. The reason I call myself the High Fist is because back in the old days, and when I mean old days, I mean just about 7 or 8 months ago, because since then things have snowballed. But back in the old days, when Ishka's Discord server only had like 50 people, 100 people.
Yeah.
I was the sort of one of the senior most members there, and based on Discord activity, you get promoted or whatever. So I was your first High Fist, was I not, Ishka?
The OG, straight up, exactly.
Yeah. So we go a long way.
A long time coming, so that's why it's just an absolute honor. And just honestly, you have like killer content and just the Malazan knowledge. We were like broing out over Beak, like, you know, back at the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020, back when it was a whole different world. So this is this is gonna be fun.
Yeah. And sort of you know what, before I get into that, so I might never get a chance to ask you this again, and who knows when we might collab on this channel again. Why did you name me Ruthan Bad?
Ruthan good, but you were just in there shit talking everyone all the time and really just like elevating the shall I say the fun factor of the Discord, because we were all in there, of course, nerding out, but your subscribers will know because they've, you know, smash like and subscribe and all of that jazz. You know what you bring to the table. It's the personality, the shit talking, you know what I mean? You love to be that devil's advocate and stir the pot. You always like have a really good viewpoint too, and it just keeps the conversation going, keeps everyone laughing. So you're the kind of bad boy fist of the 13th Army, I guess.
We were and still are the yin and yang, obviously. So guys, we are here to discuss a fun topic, Mother's Day, a Mother's Day special. So motherhood in the Malazan world, we obviously sort of get the irony here, guys, that it's two males discussing a motherhood in Malazan. But as some of you might know, obviously most of you are subscribers to Ishkar's channel as well. So we have this thing where we sort of have little of have these collabs to commemorate each special day, so to speak. So we've done one for Valentine's Day. We've done one for April Fools. We did one about 2 weeks ago for May Day, right? International Workers' Day. So this time we just thought let's upload this on my channel, since it's only been about a week since we did the last one. And also to everybody who might think, oh, why are there two men discussing Mother's Day? How dare you assume my gender? I must warn you that misgendering someone is violence. And please sort of check your privileges and check your hate and your bigotry, and do not assume my gender. So with all that said, Iskar, favorite mothers, I think we need to start with one of the big ones, either the Maib or Mother Dark, or we've got to start with some of the sort of the really heavy motherhood storylines. Where do you want to start?
Man, you wanted to go heavy. I was going to say, best hugs and go for the matron or something. I don't know, but yeah, let's do Mother Dark, because that's a complicated one, and that's the one like that I always look to you for and to get the insights on. I love the whole kind of parallel, I guess, that there is between like Mother Dark and Stani anyway. So we can talk about Mother Dark and then drill it down to the mortal realm and talk about Stani maybe, because for me, the big question that at least that I don't totally have, or maybe I just didn't get it out of the Carcanis stuff, and maybe you can flesh it out more, but it's like with Stani, you really understand the nature of the estrangement and stuff, and like, you know what I mean? All of the kind of ins and outs. It's not that complicated, right? Why it's a tough situation for her, but it's like, I don't totally have a full understanding of all the stuff that leads up. We have the first two books of Carcanis. We see there's like, this conflict and all this racial stuff going on, but you just kind of hear, it's more like one of those aspects of all the stuff with Rake's character, kind of where it's there's been a lot of tell and not show, so you don't really know exactly what precipitated it. So
yeah, so this is why I can't wait for the third book to come out, because once the trilogy ends, we can give it the Ruth and BADD treatment. I think even Erickson's kind of pointed out that the Carcanis books haven't perhaps picked up the way that he would have liked them to have flown off the shelf or whatever. But once they are done, then we can start giving them the proper treatment. So the same thing happened with the 10 big books as well, where I think even Erickson has sort of acknowledged that once it was done, once it was a complete body of work, that's when the real sort of level of interest came in. So with Mother Talk, the one thing I guess I would add to what you said, and my perspective, is that the comparison with Stani is interesting, because with Stani, we are almost seeing a real event, at least as real as how sort of close the Malazan books will come to real in terms of unreliable narrator and whatever, the cripple god being the one who ultimately writes this, blah, blah, blah. So with Stani, we get a proper human story that we can kind of identify with. Whereas with Mother Dark and Rake, it's all filled with so much myth and history and religion and sort of poetry and all that, where it's far harder for us, as you were saying, to even decipher what the issue was. What exactly was the central issue? How did it affect all the different parties, right? And why did it get the form that it did? Why did that narrative, that legend, ultimately get the form that it did? So hopefully once the trilogy is over, we will have deeper questions. But my guess is that the actual fun, at least for me, when it comes to dissecting Mother Dark, will be in looking at what happened and then going back to how that entire thing was shrouded in mythology. Because, as you know, I'm very interested in mythology that's kind of based on real life events. That's kind of how Hindu and Buddhist mythology works, where you have these actual historic events that are then recorded through myth and poetry and all that. So T. Standi history is very much like that. In terms of sort of how she fares as a mother, once again, I guess this is where the male who has no kids comes in, and I don't see how you can call her a good mother. I mean, if anything, she's not. And I mean, once again, I know I'm probably going to get a little bit of hate, at least, for saying this.
That's okay. Look at you. You're so brave.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, guys. Nothing phases me, guys. Come on. Anyway, so I understand that this might be because of my own limited perspective as a fatherless man, but I am uncomfortable with the idea of sort of mothers abandoning their kids. And we see this theme get
Yeah.
played out over and over again. And I think once again, there's a sort of Western, non-Western dichotomy thing there as well, where for
Hmm.
me, the whole idea of someone abandoning motherhood, particularly after the child is born, for me, culturally, that is it's something that I'm quite squeamish about.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And I
No,
think
and
that
I
builds
think
into the Stony, Silara kind of thing you wanted us to take this into as well.
yeah, definitely. And I think, it's hard because I think you're right. There's like a Western aspect to it that we have like a whole kind of pro-life, pro-choice politic thing underlying. I think the way that like people from the US and Canada probably and stuff read the books, you know what I mean? And so it's like I think that's all kind of like wrapped in. And also we're just kind of a litmus test type of society, and we're trying to figure out, like, you know what I mean, where people fall on the spectrum, or what's the message, you know what I mean, and then like judge it or whatever. And um but it's tough because like for me, I totally get the estrangement part too. And like that's why I think, there's like a different aspect to the Rake Mother Dark piece of it, because they were like both, that was like disagreement based, regardless of whatever the specifics ended up being, you know what I mean? It was like that's two adults who were like, beefing, and he might have, one of them threw a temper tantrum, obviously, um, and so I think that one is kind of just like, that's, you can't control. I think there's families like that, you know what I mean, where it's like you can't see eye to eye. And so maybe especially in this like politically charged environment, there's like books out there that's like how to talk to your brother-in-law at Thanksgiving and stuff like that, because it's like we're just like a divided civilization, I think, and stuff like that too. So
I'm glad to
that
see
kind of,
such cutting edge social research. Ishka, how to talk to your brother-in-law. Wow. That is
dude,
truly state of the art intellectual stuff.
you thought that was fantasy books over there. These are self-help, baby. So no, but there's that aspect. But with like the Stanian and kind of Harlow and Solara thing, I think that, for me, I get that. And my sister was kind of, I don't know if I should like get super personal, but my sister was like adopted from, a family that was like kind of, had a lot of issues, I guess. And so I kind of see that like positive aspect of it too. And like, I know you don't go for the ice stuff that much, but in the Return of the Crimson Guard, Rillish hooks up with that. I forget her name, but she was under him. She was one of his subordinates or whatever. And they ended up having a baby, and she, was like, yeah, we'll just send it to my, he's like, what are we going to do? You're going to have a baby? He's like, all this stuff. She's like, yeah, we'll just send it to like my brother. It's cool. It's like, it's not a bad thing. And so I think there's like something, less like that takes it or makes it less of a negative thing, right? If you can like recognize where you're at as a person and stuff. And like, and for me, I'm grateful to have my sister, you know what I mean? And so like, I'm, in the context of like that Western kind of whatever framework that we were talking about, where it's like they could have like went and got an abortion or something like that, then like I'm glad that, so that, and I think that for Harlow, that piece didn't work out. That's what makes it even more crushing, and why you're like pissed at, because it wasn't like with my sister, where she came and lived in like some suburbia household and then like had a good life and went to like a suburban high school and like, wore mom jeans and stuff like that in the 80s. So I think that's the part that makes it tough too. And if there is any like beef against Stani for that choice out there, it's like it's because you kind of see the consequence wasn't that positive when he ends up like going and being a slave in a mine and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Harlow's such a fantastic character, because
Yeah.
we finally see a kid who's just a normal kid. Erickson sort of can't just give us normal kids in the usual
Yeah.
Ericksonian fashion. I mean, Panic,
Kettle. Yeah.
Kettle, right?
Yeah.
Silver Fox,
Yeah.
Sin, Grub. All of Erickson's children are just powerful and scary
Yeah.
and intelligent. and we
Rudolell the
finally.
dinosaur. The
Oh yeah,
dragon.
I would be afraid of anybody under the age of 10 in an
Spite
Erickson
and envy and Carcanus and
yeah,
malice.
yeah, exactly, right. Although I do empathize with that a bit, as I was telling you. So
Yeah, I know.
in sort of in that sense, Harlow was so normal and Harlow's so likable. He's so naive and young, and Erickson really goes into his sort of the mind of a child. One of my favorite books is there's an Indian writer called R.K. Narayan who was extremely famous. He wrote the Malgudi Days and things like that.
Yeah.
Graham Greene called him the finest writer, and he wrote a book called Swami and Friends, which is
Okay.
one of Graham Greene's famous favorite novellas. It's just a small novella about a 10-year-old kid, and
Yeah.
it's just so charming and feel good and sort of adorable, right? If
Yeah.
I'm allowed to use that word, because it gets into the mind of that child, and you see how innocent and likable and pure these kids are. And Harlow's a lot like that. Harlow is an extremely innocent, pure
Yes.
kid whom you just want to protect. And Erickson keeps putting him in these really, really brutal scenarios where sort of Harlow keeps escaping by the width of his hair. I'm so happy he got a good ending and that they kind of reunite in the end, Harlow and Stoney.
Yeah.
And Gruntle himself, if I'm not mistaken, he tries to take care of Harlow, but he can't. And I think that's one of the things that drove him away. As in, Gruntle is in love with Stoney, and he always wanted to kind of settle down with Stoney. And Stoney's relationship with Harlow essentially means that he can't even have the whole tragic male lover. As long as she's happy, I will still wander the earth, whatever, right? As long as she is happy, I can still sacrifice my life. Gruntle doesn't get that either when he sees how Stoney is in terms of how she is as a mother with Stoney and all those complications there. So yeah, sad story, but I'm glad that at least Harlow got a really happy ending. I enjoyed that. I am glad Steven Erickson gave Harlow a happy ending.
Me too. And I love Gruntle just that much more. You know what I mean? Because it's like, dude, and that's what I was saying, I think, in one of my videos. But it's like the bigger the badass, it seems like these guys are like the better, like actual just human beings, like the bigger the heart or whatever. You know what I mean? The bigger the muscles, the bigger the heart or something. Because it's like, here's this guy who can literally like turn into a freaking giant tiger, tear people to shreds. You know what I mean? And then he's like, you know, the kind of ultimate big brother, like uncle figure or whatever, who's like always going by and like giving that shady family extra money and stuff and trying to at least like make sure that he's looked after and whatever. And it's just like, yeah, I know it's a Mother's Day one, but Gruntle's the bro for that.
But Gruntle's actually quite relevant, because think of who kills Gruntle. A mother whose motherhood parallels Tawny's in many ways, except she actually liked. So she sends Ulchenpral away. Stawny sends Harlow away.
Yeah.
Ulchenpral grows up without Kilava, and Harlow grows up without Stawny. Except the only difference is that in this case, it was a voluntary conception and the husband is gone. And in this case, it was rape, and Stawny doesn't even know who the husband is. It's, I mean, some seer domin or whatever, right? So there are actually parallels there between Kilava and Stawny, if you think about it. And Stawny sort of kills Gruntle metaphorically, and Kilava kills Gruntle literally.
Wow. Oh my God, that's deep. See, that's why I love this channel. I would have never connected the dots on that, because like Kalava whole deal, and she's like a whole another can of worms when it comes to her arc. I think she's like honestly one of the, I don't know, for me, she like the more and more I read the books, I feel like Kalava is more of like a villain, honestly, because she's a dick if you look at like her actual actions and stuff and all the memories of ice stuff. And then like you just said, the her whole deal with Onrak too, and then Ulchenpral obviously as well is like all wrapped up in that. She just isn't like it, not just in her motherhood skills, you know what I mean, but just like in terms of just being kind of selfish and stuff. I don't know.
Her selfishness creates the two big catastrophes that we have to deal with for the first 4 fucking books.
Yes,
until we
right.
get the Rula threat. The two big sort of major dangers that our protagonists have to deal with are the Panian and
Yeah,
Shaik, both of
yeah.
whom were created by
By
Kilava.
her,
Right? Shaik is
exactly.
created because of Kilava and Ondrak, and the Panian was created because once again Kilava tries to be the hero and ends up messing that entire thing up. In fact, there is only one scene that I like with Kilava, which is
Mhm.
where she turns up, and I think it's Reaper's Gale, and you don't
Yeah.
know it's her in the beginning, and Silch's Ruin, I think, is about to kill her
Yes.
son. And all of a sudden, this lady turns up and is like, I will rip you to shreds, Silch's
Yeah.
Ruin. Because until then, Silch's Ruin is like the brother of Anamander Rake, and he even says, oh,
Escaped
I'll
in
be.
his ass. Yeah.
Yeah, and he says, listen, I'll deal with the cripple god if I have to, right? So this guy is unstoppable as far as we're concerned. And
Yeah.
here's this woman who just says, take your hands off my child, you damn dirty ape, or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
Silch's Ruin has no choice. That was a really good scene.
Yeah, that was a pretty badass scene. That was her one like little moment in the sun, I guess. But yeah, she's like unrepentant for all of her crimes too, mostly. And that's like the other thing. It's like, she could have made the sacrifice. Even at the end of Memories of Ice, when they get the Paniencia cornered, she comes back and isn't like, oh my God, I'm so sorry for like, she's like, yeah, I'm gonna kill you for what you did to talk the younger who's my brother's friend. You know what I mean? She wasn't like, I'm sorry about the centuries of torture.
Yeah, and she then blindsides Mark and then tells Tool to kill Mark. And Tool
Yeah.
says, I can't do that.
Yeah.
There's a
She's like,
reason Kilava's the trader because Ericsson's always set up that she's got these, you can call it, I guess, individualistic tendencies or selfish tendencies, or I
yeah,
guess, depending on whether we want to put a positive or a negative spin on it. But
yeah,
her individualism, let's put it that way, does create some of the major catastrophes in the first half of the
definitely.
series.
Totally. Like she's one of those through lines too. You know what I mean? And she keeps on showing up for the whole time. So she's kind of like one of those Calor ones who it's like on the face, you think like, oh, it's the crippled god, it's the pan, you know what I mean? But she's like the undercurrent, like alongside of Calor for a lot of the shit.
And she gets a happy ending.
Yeah.
After creating all this shit, she's one of the characters who gets a happy ending with her
I know.
brother and blah, blah, blah.
Yep, the reunion and all that stuff. So hey, sometimes bad deeds go unpunished or whatever.
Yeah. So let's use let's use the Tool thing to transition into Haton, because I think
Yeah.
some people mentioned that as well, right? As something we need to discuss. So I've done an entire video on Haton. I don't think we need to
Yes.
kind of regurgitate that entire thing here. It's a
Yeah.
tragic story, obviously, and as a wife and a mother, the sort of the brutal end that we initially think she faces,
Yeah.
and just it's when she realizes that she has doomed her children that she gives in to her rape. It's
Yeah.
when she realizes that her children are now kind of destined to be slaughtered because of her foolishness, her negligence. That is when she ultimately gives up all hope. It's not even
Yeah.
her realizing that her husband is now doomed. It's when she thinks about her kids that even she kind of descends into this mentality of, what kind of a mother am I for doing this to my kids? I deserve this punishment. I deserve this humiliation.
Yeah, totally. And I think, that's like what is the sad part is like a lot of like victims do that, right? And then they like internalize it and stuff and just like guilt and stuff and like what did I do? You know what I mean? And like we have a lot of that in the US, I know for sure. And just like, with personal situations that we've had where it's like, people always do that, like even on the news and stuff. And to see her do that. The thing I am excited for though is, on a more like kind of positive note for Hatan is like, those are like Krupp's kids, right? The older ones. So that could be something that we potentially see, because like in The Witness or something, like I'm more excited to see what happens, like, because those must be some pretty badass kids. And then you have the kind of little Tool, like mini Tool version that's running around out there. So there's still some kind of fun aspects to that, but I at least like that they somewhat got a kind of happy ending. I mean, that's one of the most like controversial parts of all the 10 books, right? Like that's before Malazan was a thing. Like if you go on the old forums and stuff, that was what people would always beef about, right? Was like the whole Hitan stuff. But there's like I guess a positive outcome for them, and in a way that she gets the
I
different
just wish it
feedback and
had
all that.
something to do with her. The fact that she had a happy ending was just a coincidence. She had
Yeah,
no agency in that. She had nothing to do with that. It was just a sort of
or it was
a
the
sort of
Tool kind of.
yeah. I mean, Tool himself didn't do much. It was just Erickson deciding that this is how it should end. That these guys should
Yeah,
get
yeah,
a happy ending. It's not like one of those other happy endings in the
like an
series where
earn thing.
yeah, exactly, where the characters have earned it, the characters have gone through this process where they've dealt with it, right?
Yeah,
Where there's a sense of justice for what happened to her. I just wish it wasn't just a major stroke of luck that she got her agency and her motherhood back.
yeah, totally. No, and it's like even when she became a mom, you know what I mean? It's like she kind of had just like a very kind of, in some ways, not not as bad, but she had like a Kalava focus, like an individual focused aspect. She was prideful in a lot of ways, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. And I think that like prevented her from like you say, like until the very end, connecting the dots on some of the consequences, I guess, of everything that she was doing and all of her wrangling. And she was like, but I guess, and that also makes me think like in some ways it's kind of like a courageous thing that she was doing too, right? Because she was like bucking societal norms, and that was like ultimately what led to her downfall and stuff too. But she just did it like in such a prideful and abrasive way that it was like, she wasn't like the uniter or whatever that like somehow like got everyone on board with like her being the.
Neither her nor Tool came off looking intelligent from that
Yeah,
entire storyline. Tool comes off
yeah,
looking like a fool because he knows that this is going to happen and he just lets them kill
yeah,
him, right? Despite him being, because I think I mentioned this to you before as well in another video. In the previous scene, we see the Bargas just stunned with the Tool's sword play. And they say,
yeah,
we could attack this guy with an army and there's still nothing that we can do. And
right,
then in the next scene, there's some small random raid that happens on their
yeah,
camp, and Tool just lets them voluntarily slit his throat, knowing that this is what's going to happen to Hayton and his kids once he
yeah,
dies. And the
totally.
reason is once again some sort of metaphysical, tragic, philosophical thing that I just don't get. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
No, it's got a little Brandon Sanderson feel to that part, because I just read, it's like I guess to underscore the character, components of Tool or something. But and that's like this guy in Mistborn that I'm listening to with my daughter, who's like getting more into fantasy, so she wanted to start on that, and he does the same thing, because spoilers, Mistborn, if there's anybody, but the guy like lets him basically take away his kingdom from him, because he wants to just like do he like elects a Congress basically, and the Congress like kind of wrangles the power away from him, and he kind of just is like, oh, but I'm so noble that I'm just gonna kind of like let them, and he knows it's going to be a disaster, and that these are like greedy bastards and stuff, and that it's not going to end well, but he just goes, but the laws are the laws, and I follow the and it kind of has that little where you want him to
Which
be like, no, F that, and like go out and cut some people's heads off.
which one are you guys on?
We're on the Well of Ascension. We just finished the Well of Ascension on the way back from Harry Potter last night.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miss
So
Bond's a lot of fun, and sort of. So how old is she? You were saying?
she's 11, so it's a little risky for her, but she's like gobbling up books left and right through, because we were in lockdown for so long, so she just like became a crazy reader. So she's been just like Earthsea. I don't know. She's been picking just books off the shelf and reading them. So
Little kids these days, man, they're so much smarter than we were.
she
Go on.
specifically is. I don't know how I have a kid like this, but they did like the testing and she reads at like a 17-year-old level or something like that. So
Well, hey, this is all your genetics, Iskar. The sort of
no, hey,
the
this isn't about
Malazan
me. My
genetics.
parenting sucks. So we're talking about other people's parenting here.
That's good. Speaking about other people's parenting, let's sort of get to one of the most, to me, interesting cases of motherhood because it is a non-human
Yeah.
concept of
Okay.
motherhood, which is the
Yeah.
matron. And
Yeah.
firstly, the idea of a matriarchal society, of a non-human matriarchal society, we've seen that with some of the kind of, the what's that guy's name, Ishka, who writes about Drist and Ray Salvatore, right? We've seen
Okay.
the Ray Salvatore type Dungeons and Dragons type Underdark. The Drow are a matriarchal society in many ways that we see in Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
and Erickson puts a completely new twist to it. He kind of takes it to the next level because
Okay.
they are just an evil underground matriarchal society, while Erickson also infuses that reptilian aspect to it.
Yeah.
And I just like that on the one hand, they're this cold and calculating race, the way you would expect a lizard humanoid race to be.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Erickson finds ways to humanize them as well. Like once you get into the Shigal assassin's head, Gurul's head, the Kachen Chamal forever become a much more relatable race because you start understanding how they think and you start understanding the desperation and the futility ahead of them as well. A big sort of transition for this would be in Reaper's Gale, where we merely see the two Kachen Chamal as the companions of Red Mask. And we get their names as well, Sagar, Chok, and something else. We get their names as well. But it's only once we get to the final book, either the end of the 9th book or the final book itself, where we actually see their internal thoughts, and the two of them are in love with each other, and she is bearing his kids, and she's going to be the last matron because they want to go start her own nest. So one of the central themes of one of the final storylines is motherhood as well. The Kachen Chamal are fighting to make sure that their last matron has a stable world to live in.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, for me, I've never read anything like that before. I was like, what is this like giant lizard platypus thing that's like hug and talk and crushing all of his like bones and stuff? But he definitely, it's like, apt to, and he humanizes them, and you kind of, I forget what book it's in, but he talks about the backstory at one point, and like she kind of, even before that Memories of Ice matron goes into the rift, they had like this whole crazy civil war, right, with the short tails, and like because I always kind of, my analogy to them, even though they're reptilian or whatever, is like they're kind of like honeybees or whatever, right? And she's like the queen bee, and then she has all these different types of offspring that she can churn out for different utilitarian kind of functions in her society and all that. And
almost like like an ant society or a bee society, where there are guards, and then there are drones, there are the regular workers, and it's the queen. It's all, the entire nest is centered around the queen. There was one observation I was going to make about the Kachen Chamal, which is that, so there's a debate in history and feminist studies and international relations of, so is war a masculine trait? Is war a masculine tendency, or is it a human tendency? So when we see female leaders taking up the political mantle, will we see lesser conflict or more? So from what we see in human history, it doesn't make a big difference. I can name at least 3 or 4 prime ministers, female prime ministers or presidents in the 20th century who were far more they were tough nuts to crack. And in fact, they took pride in being sort of tough. So if you look at Golda Meir or Margaret Thatcher or Indira Gandhi or Srima Bandaranaike or Jayalalitha, you can look at all of these major political female leaders around the world in many different countries, and they almost become masculine in that
Mm,
process because they need to prove that as women they can kind of hang in there with them. I mean, from your own
yeah.
country, Ishka,
Yeah.
look at the sort of the tremendous effort Hillary Clinton put in to kind of portray herself as someone who was just as tough as the guys, because that's a normal thing. Here, that that kind of analogy is stretched out a bit, because even though they are a matriarchal society, of course, you can't compare human societies with the Kachen Chamal. But I
Yeah.
find it interesting that even though it's a matriarchal society, we hear about great Kachen Chamal wars against the Folklore Sale,
Yeah.
great Kachen Chamal wars against the Kachen Naruk, Kachen Chamal wars against the Tea Traces, which is the prologue of Memories of Ice.
Yeah.
So they have been, and they are the ones who ultimately, this matriarchal society is what ultimately is responsible for the destruction of the universe as well, because
Yeah.
they are the ones who kind of have ultimately set a time span to all of existence.
Yeah, exactly. That was their like one fail safe, like red button option, right? And actually it's interesting if you think about the Naruk, right? Because they are kind of like the rebellious children who didn't want to like go along with, or be like kind of part of that top down society or whatever. And so and I can't remember, maybe you do, but that isn't that why they built all the moon spawn things, the flying fortress things, was to like be able to help fend off the short tails or something, because they were just having such a like gruesome civil war, because she didn't have the mind control over those ones that that she had over everyone else.
So the short tails are a bit of a mystery, because we do know that the short tails rebelled, and we do know that it was the Kachen who created the short tails,
Yeah,
but we still have no idea what exactly that beef is,
I
because,
know.
and we don't know much about the Kachen life cycle and lifespan either. With the Chamal, we know they have nests, there's a matron, they grow old, they die, the next generation takes over. Are the
Yeah,
Naruk ageless? Are they sort of, are they more like artificial constructs, or are they more of a genetically modified life form? The
yeah,
Samardev autopsy of a Kachen Naruk. So I've heard some people say that's not even a Kachen Naruk, that it could just be a demon, but I
uh-huh.
have no doubt in my mind that that's a Kachen Naruk. I don't know why. I've just always assumed that it was a Naruk that Kasa fought
Yeah.
in the Bone Hunters. And even there, so was that thing there the entire time, just ageless? Because it didn't seem to have been weathered down by age.
Yeah, it wasn't like an undead thing. But how do they have a matron if they were just the spawned out by a matron? You know what I mean? So I know what
But
you mean. I don't know.
do they have a matron, or were they just created through some kind
Yeah.
of machine? We don't know that. So it's once again, if we were to draw those weird parallels again, the one society which is clearly matriarchal is
Yeah.
also the society where the lost children, so to speak, we don't even know whether they're the biological children or not.
Yeah. Well, and she like goes nuts too. Like in the Memories of Ice one, goes nuts because all of her kids died and stuff like that. And that's kind of like, um, in some ways parallels to like Sandalath too, who like goes nuts over Orphantal, or like, well, she doesn't even know he died, right? But she goes nuts just wanting him back and all that stuff, and they end up like locking her in the closet at the end and whatever, because she just so you kind of, and I have a friend who's like spouse, and they have 3 kids, and they like had this tragic like accident, and the wife and one of the kids like died, and like that, you can imagine like what that does to mess someone up. Plus, like, well, and Sandalath has like a ton of issues that we find out in the regular, or not, I mean in the prequels, right, that you find out that craziness or whatever runs pretty deep back to her origins or whatever. But that's another one of these like estrangement stories, right? Because I guess she was dead, so, but she was with like Silchas Ruin though, I think, before that, and that's how she ended up dead. So they were obviously like estranged before that or something, because Corlat and Orphantal were with Rake.
Yeah, and she sort of is resurrected in Midnight Tides in the Letheri
Yeah.
Kingdom, where Silchas is trapped in an Azoth house. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're all there together. What the Sandala thing, I wish there was more that was done with it, with her descent
Yeah.
into madness, because so this is how I always see it, right? And I may be off the mark here. So in both the major battles in the last book, the one on the shore and the
Mm-hmm.
one in Kolange, we have a female character losing her sanity. One is a parent without her family, and the other is a child without her family. So we see Sin going mad, and that has huge ramifications for the people there. And here we
Yeah.
see Sandalat going mad. So one is a child who doesn't have her family and who's now descending into madness because of the sheer power that's coming into her. And I think someone even makes the observation that kids like that, if they don't have the proper training and if they don't have someone to control them, then uh, the chaos just ends up consuming them, and that's what
Yeah.
happens to Sin. And
Totally.
parallelly, we also have a mother who is kind of losing her sanity.
Totally. Sin's like the Jean Grey or whatever, or the Phoenix of who didn't kind of have that guidance. But no, I think what you're right with Sandlot, that's like, I think maybe just like the kind of visceral piece of like going back to Carcanis and all that triggers it. But like, they kind of almost had like a Stani and Gruntle, like her and Withal, they kind of just had like a bickery type, like a bantery type relationship. She wasn't like full blown off
Yeah, I mean,
the reservation at that point.
yeah, she was always a fun character, and
Yeah.
then her storyline just takes this really, really unexpected dark turn towards the end. I mean, whether it was her with talking to iron bars, or whether it was her traveling with Whittle later, she was always just a fun side character. That was how I saw it, and
Yeah,
that
totally.
kind of makes a descent in the Crippled God. I guess to some readers it would make it more satisfying because it came out of nowhere and there was a lot of time devoted to that character. But
Yeah.
to some other readers, I think it would also be disappointing that she was, because Erickson does have this trait with this tendency to take some of these fun characters and then just make them really tragic. We've
Deep
gone
and
through the
tragic.
example of
Yeah.
Pearl before.
Yeah, totally. No, and I think you're right, because when you actually when you go back and read Carcanis, then the stuff at the end kind of makes sense. What doesn't then make sense is kind of like, I don't know, for me, like seeing what happened then between the end of Carcanis and whatever happens there, and like her being a part of Silchas Ruin's army and doing all that crazy stuff. Like, I don't know, that's going to be interesting to see how kind of like she goes from this really traumatized, kind of like already having like pretty serious like mental trauma and effects and stuff like that in Carcanis, to then like when she's reborn with Withel, like I said, she seems just like normal. They're bickery and they have like a banter and stuff and whatever, but then
they have like one of these Iskar Alpus Mogora type
yes,
husband
right,
wife back and
yeah,
forth,
yeah,
and that's how I always took it. Yeah, here's that goofy wacky couple again. Okay,
yeah,
that guy
yeah,
suffered in the crippled gods domain for a while, so he has a wife now. He's with these guys. He's probably going to build some weapon or something
yeah.
for them in the future, but none of that actually happens. It all turns into something which is a device for Sandalat to lose her sanity. And Withel, does he even do anything in the end? I think he just sits there and does nothing.
Yeah, he doesn't do anything. So, which is kind of the kind of husband you want. And actually, this is, one of those main kind of, I would say, arrows in your quiver in your campaign against the Tistandi. So the Sandalath story. So there you go.
At least she's not overrated. So remember,
Yeah.
Ishka, my campaign, my crusade is not against the Tistandi. My crusade is against characters being overrated.
Yeah,
So,
no, I know, but she is one of those just very tragic, takes that very tragic turn though.
and she was a fun Tistandi character for a change. That is
Yes.
so rare. A Tistandi
Yeah.
character whose presence on the page makes you smile for a change. And then Erickson's like, nope, T standy, depressed, fucked,
Yeah.
fuck you, bye.
That's what you thought. He's like, ha, gotcha. Yeah, no, I love it.
Damn it, Erickson. Speaking of sort of fuck yous, right?
Yeah.
What about the biggest, once again, maybe parasitic is not the right word to use, but in my Tila Naimas video, I did sort of mention that Silver Fox's story is a kind of weird coming of age type thing, and it's a metaphor for the Tila Naimas and blah, blah, blah. So, of course, motherhood it will have a permanent impact on someone's body, on a mother's body, right?
Yeah.
But this is kind of that metaphor. Maybe Erickson was going for a number of different themes, and as men, we can only decode a few of it, and maybe the sort of. So shout out to all the mothers who are Malas tubers, right? I know
That's
Quick
right.
Jen has 3 kids. I know
right.
Bend, our resident artist, has a kid. So I do know that many of our beloved Malas tube sort of voices are mothers, and it would be nice to hear what they have to say. But from my perspective, right,
Yeah.
the sort of the whole way that Silver Fox and the Maib are, maybe they're not a metaphor for motherhood, maybe they are. But what did you think about that, where the child is literally killing the parent, where the child is
Oh,
literally
yeah.
sucking the life force? I'm sure you can relate to that, Ishka.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, as having 2 kids and not even being a mom, but yes, I think that was almost it was almost a literal, it's not even, I don't know if you could even call it like a metaphor. It's like, they're actually doing it, right? Because it does like take a ton out of you, just like physically and obviously emotionally, and and I want to shout out another mom, which is Counselor Moonspawn's mom, who's also a Malazan reader. So we
And
keep
who
trying
needs
to
to
coax
start
her.
a YouTube channel soon.
Yeah, we keep trying to rope her into a collab with her daughter on that channel. But no, I think, for me, I totally relate to that. And I think it is like, it's a direct correlation, because it takes a lot out of you, and you know what I mean, and kind of you can see the war, the internal war that must create, right? Because it's like, on the one hand, you care about that child. It's like from your body, like there's no stronger bond than a mom and the kid and all that. And like, even with Stani, you know what I mean, who like kind of had to make that choice to give the kid away. She never loses that, like, it's always hard for her. It's never easy. It's never like, oh, I just don't give a shit and I can just kind of like turn my back, even though it's like, yes, it's the product of some really heinous stuff that happened to her. And that's like the challenge as well. But like, she's never able to divorce herself from, and just be able to fully walk away and not like have the guilt and not cry and have that cathartic moment and stuff. And so it's like on the one hand, it's like it takes so much from you though too, right? And then you're old and you don't look all young, and like, in I don't know how it is over there, but in Western society, there's like a high value placed on physical appearance and stuff like that, which the kids like have a direct impact on as well, right? Just because like when you have a kid, you get a big old gut and stuff with a baby in there that weighs 10 pounds and whatever else, and like, so yeah, I don't know what that must be like though, you know what I mean? Because it's like, on the one hand, you want to give everything, and then on the other hand, it's like, well, dude, you're freaking killing me, you're taking from me, I'm tired, I want to sleep, you're always hungry, especially like when the kid's like breastfeeding and stuff. There was like times when my wife was like, and there's only so much you can do as the dad, right? It's like, you can wake up in the middle of the night and be like, yeah, I'll stay up with you and stuff, you know what I mean? But it's not like physically draining you and all that other stuff. And so it's like, I'm a selfish person, you know what I mean? If that was me, I'd be like, screw you, baby. Like, what the heck? I want to sleep. I want to, I want to go hang out and do stuff with my friend. You know what I mean? And so there's just that whole internal war. Plus, then I want to talk about the Silver Fox side too, though. But I'm curious to hear what you think about that, though. But I think that's the interesting part, is like, you want to give, but then you also like feel bad because you want to be a person too, and have like some stuff for yourself, and not just be 100% giving all the time. And so it's like,
for me, the most powerful thing about that is her transition in terms of her self rationalization for her own kind of acceptance of motherhood. Because in the beginning, she's quite gung-ho about it. in the beginning, she's honored that she's a maib. She's
Yeah.
honored that she has this child, and sort of she's a lot more about protecting her child, protecting this weak, helpless kid from all these evil, potentially evil enemies like Calor. And
Yeah.
as you keep going, you see it wear down on her. You see the motherhood wear down on her, duty wearing down
Yeah.
on her. And one of the things where even the stone-hearted or the heartless like myself, Ishka, would even us, we would feel for her, is where she starts feeling guilty. She starts feeling guilty that she's beginning to harbor resentment against her own
Right.
child
Right.
for
Yeah.
being this parasite. And she is like, once again, bringing a personal example from a friend, since we're doing that. I mean, that person won't watch this, so I don't have
Yeah.
to mention the
Exactly. Who
name or
cares?
anything. So I have a friend who always wanted to be a mother, and the child she had and her son has certain genetic problems
Hmm.
where his head is extremely large and the body is small, so he can't
Okay.
talk, and the head itself needs to be kind of put upright. And the first year or so, she was so brave and she was so willing to embrace this, and she was like, no, you don't get it, I've always wanted to be a mother, I've always wanted to experience this, blah blah blah. But the more the years pass, the more sort of you see the stress bear down on her. She's around my age, but she has a set of gray hair already, and she's kind of really lost interest and hope in life, and everything is that child now. And
Yeah.
she feels guilty sometimes that she resents this, and you don't really know whether the right thing to say is it's all right to feel resentment, or is the right thing to kind of tell her to feel guilty about it. I don't know what exactly the answer is, right? Maybe there is no
No.
fixed answer, but
Yeah.
that kind of really connected with me, the Maib's guilt that she was starting to harbor resentment towards her child, and how even as her willpower is slowly being broken down, she is still looking for excuses to
Yeah.
be a good mother. She's still looking for excuses to excuse her child.
Totally. No, yeah, and it's like that's what I mean. It's a total war, right? Because then you feel like a total dick. Is you're like, dude, I'm a parent. I'm supposed to put my kids first, and that's what you do, and you do everything for them. And I don't know if it's like Society and Raph talked about this when we did a little collab on the dark side of empathy and compassion and stuff, but I don't know if it's like that capitalism or what it is, but not necessarily, but there is like a kind of a transactional component to just interpersonal relations, right? That like you give and give and give to a kid, and like at some subconscious level, like you want there to be some kind of a payoff, right? Some kind of a joy or some kind of like an appreciation or some like thing on the other side of the scale of the giving, right? Or just like, I mean, just to step back and go, what a great kid I have, you know what I mean? But I think there's like probably, and it's these are the things I think grapple with as just human beings, is like just being a selfish, person in general and stuff. But I think there is like a selfish component, and like, I have a lot of conversations sometimes with other dads and stuff. And like, I know this one guy and he's like a great dad, you know what I mean? Killer dad, does everything for his kids and everything like that. And I don't know if you watched on Netflix, The Octopus Teacher or whatever, but it's this whole interesting documentary about this guy who like forms a friendship with an octopus
Kids,
when he's,
don't watch TV. Less
yeah.
TV, more books.
Exactly. But you know what I mean? But like the whole point is that like you have to get yourself right to be able to be a good parent too. And that's the whole thing with the Maybe too, right? Is like that all that guilt, like some of it is like preventing her from having those, relationships. It's like, yeah, you want to be able to walk, dude. You know what I mean? It's like you want to be able to like slurp your soup and not have it like hurt your teeth or whatever it was. And like that's cool. You know what I mean? Like you need that to be able to like give to the mom. And I can also like relate to the silver fox side, you know what I mean? Because I kind of had a mom who, died of cancer when I was like younger, and she had that like during this period, when I was like a teenager, when you're like at your biggest, most selfish like time, right? Where you're so self-centered and the whole entire like world revolves around you. And I like, you don't have the words, you don't have the maturity level. Like, I knew my mom was important and stuff, but like during that 4-year period that she was like withering away and stuff, do you go and like, I feel exactly like Silver Fox. Like she has all these emotions. She's got this whole secret plan, right? And that's kind of like how I was. I was like the ultimate Silver Fox. I'm like, I have this secret plan. I'm going to like, be the first one to graduate college. I'm going to go get a good job. Then we're going to like have a nice house one day and I'll be able to like, I'll set you up in your own hold, right? And like do all this stuff and like totally. And then like, you know what I mean? And then like all this other like events happen and that doesn't ever get to come to fruition. Then you like live with regret. And it's interesting seeing that, the Silver Fox side of it way later on, like that, has pretty much jacked her up, that whole like plan gone wrong and just like, never having, kind of put anything up on the other side of the scale for the Mybee's guilt, you know what I mean? And trying to do it all behind the scenes and having all these pent up emotions and stuff instead of just going, dude, like, I'm sorry this is happening. I didn't ask for it to be like that. You know what I mean? And just having like open communication probably would have like done a world of good for both of them. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like a sad part of not just like, motherhood and parenthood in general, but it's like, and why I, love reading and stuff. Cause you got to work on those communication skills. Like so much in all these books could be resolved just by, open and honest communication. So.
Ishka, I completely agree. Thank you for sharing that story. And I think what you just said completely destroys the narrative that perhaps men should not be doing a video on Mother's Day, because look, ultimately we have moms and anybody who sort of whose mother has played a big role in who they are, or where the absence of a mother has played a big role in who they are, or where losing or gaining a mother in the case of people who are adopted, like your sister, for example.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
we are all eligible to talk about motherhood, because even though some of us may never experience motherhood from one end, we all experience motherhood or the lack of it from the other. Because so go on, Ishka.
No. I think you're absolutely right. And for me, it's like, it's not about being prescriptive and being like, kind of categorizing and then judging all these different moms. Like for me, it's just like a perspective on, the challenges that they faced and all the dynamics there, because, like the biggest thing I took away from the Mybee storyline was like appreciating your mom. You know what I mean? Like, well, what I took away was like feeling like a total piece of crap. But like what I take back to my like regular life now is like going back and saying like, you know what I mean? Making sure my kids like stop and appreciate. Like I always point out like, oh my gosh, like look what your mom like did for you and stuff like that, just because like, they're going to be those young self-centered people just like every single kid is, right? You can't see, you can't put yourself out and empathize and stuff when you have like a tiny brain and haven't learned, haven't fully developed yet and all that stuff. But like, at least if I can like help to point out along the way these mile markers, then like later on when they're self-reflecting and all that stuff, and they'll be like, oh my God, my mom, you know what I mean? At least like, because they don't do that. They don't, the Mybee didn't sit there and pat herself on the back, go, I gave you everything and da-da-da. And like, I had the thumbnail where they were like yelling at each other. They didn't actually do that. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you gotta big up your moms and your wives to the kids so that they get some of that stuff on the other side of the scale. So we can just be allies, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, I can't match that by giving you a serious response, so I will just give you a humorous one. When you said what you got away from Memories of Ice was that you need to treat your mom better. What I got from Memories of Ice was that you always reserve half your warrants. Never unleash all your warrants. Always keep half of them, because you never know when you might need to blast Baukelane with the second half. When you're
one of the best quotes of the whole series. Yeah, should have saved some.
But Baukelane, I did.
Yeah, totally. That's the Bruce Willis like Die Hard quote of the books.
Yeah. Who else are we missing? So, what about Kilmandarus, the sort of the weird elder Azathanai elder goddess, whatever? Who's now? What's weird with her is that even though we do know, I mean, as if there's just one thing that's weird with her, right? So, as a mother, though, is that even though we see her doing her own stuff, the son is still clearly very, very dependent on her. The son is almost like a helpless calf, or he's like one of these needy kids who can't do much without her. And in the prequels, we see him going along with some dumb shit
Yeah.
when he was kind of away from the ambit of his mother. When he was with the errand, the two of them end up
What's his
killing
name? Seshel Lath or something like that.
Seshulat and
Yeah.
Erastus.
Yeah.
And the two of them end up killing Hood's wife.
Hood's wife.
And so he's just not a good decision maker, and he kind of gets strung along a lot. And he's kind of weak, even though he's supposed to be the father of the twins or whatever, the of Opon. She is very much it's almost like a mommy son relationship rather than a mother son relationship, if that makes sense, which is
Oh
weird
yeah.
with gods, right? Because when was the last time you read a story where one of the gods was a needy son and one of
Yeah.
the gods was a kind of almost a weak son who has to hide behind his mother's dress or whatever and peer out? But this guy's kind of like that, and I always got that vibe of a very domineering mother and an extremely weak son from the two of them.
Yeah, we all have friends like that, right? Who have a mom who, they just never got out from under their mom's skirts and whatever, and that's like kind of the relationships that they look for in their own lives too, right? Then they go get a wife that's gonna like iron their underwear and stuff and whatever and do all the, you know what I mean? And like,
And
it's
they then hide behind the wife in most cases.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's just a really codependent relationship, right? Because like it's kind of like the matron thing too, right? Is like she's like just there's just like a huge need there to like be needed basically. And so then and the other, and then on the other side there's like a need to be taken care of or whatever, like can't make decisions or want to be like domineered or just told what to do and do it kind of thing. And yeah, I think that's kind of even though, which is weird, right? Because they've got to be like a million years old or something, or 500,000 at least, because they were there before the prequel of Memories of Ice. So
at least, yeah.
You would think that at some point you'd be like, Mom, you'd have that kind of I'm my own man kind of moment, but apparently not.
Yeah, and he's just weak-willed in general. He's just a spineless mama's boy or whatever in general, and that kind of comes through in her own personality as well, because she's such a domineering personality. It's almost like an elephant with an elephant calf, and the calf always sticks to the mother elephant's legs and sort of
100%.
Yeah,
exactly. No, that's interesting. She herself is a total badass, right? Like she's pretty gnarly and like has all these crazy like schemes that she, does with I think Shadow Throne and stuff too. But I want to know more about her and Grizzin Farrell and the whole Forquerel Assail stuff too, because like in some ways she's the mother of the Forquerel Assail, I think, right? Or
yeah, because and that's the other thing that I wish I touched on in my Forquerel Assail video that I had the time to touch on or whatever, is that we never really get the link between her and even though the kid, whatever that guy's name is, Knuckles, is mentioned as being a Forquerel Assail, even though her physical features are quite clearly Forquerel Assailian, we never see the Forquerel Assail themselves refer to her. We do get the inner monologues of calm and serenity and a couple of the other big Forquerel Assail. Kilmandaros doesn't seem to have played any part in that, or at least that they are willing to acknowledge, even though we know that it's her who frees the Otataral dragon. So it's very possible that it's her idea to use the cripple god's heart as well, because it's her children. And I think Gothos in Midnight Tides, either Male or Gothos even tells her that her children have lost their way or something. And I assume that's a reference to the Forquerel Assail. And then there's obviously Grisenfall. So Grisenfall being the god that they actually killed would make sense.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of good stuff. Yeah, you should make a follow-up video because there's still some good meat left on that bone, especially with them using the the heart of the crippled god and that like being part of her bigger deal. That would be really, really interesting. But no, she's a crazy one. Like all the kind of like dragon-esque or like these like higher level being ones too, because like all of what's his name, Rude Alal's mom too is like kind of has like a psycho component to her as
Yeah, what's
well.
her name? Meandor, whatever.
Menandor, yeah,
Yeah,
and all
Menandor,
that
right?
stuff makes not a lot of sense because they're supposed to be like Asurk's daughters, but then if you read Carcanis, they're not really his daughters, and they're not all actually sisters and stuff. But she is a gnarly one, right? Because she took that by force, and then like she, Rudalau's like out doing his own thing, kind of. So I don't know. She's
And
a gnarly one.
she even saves him from somewhere, and she's like, so his entire city is covered in ice, and she kind of saves him by saying, "Oh, I worked hard to get this baguette or whatever, and I won't let that legless fool or whatever foil my plans." And she rescues Radilel and then puts him in the refugium,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is all very blurry and kind of metaphysical slash metaphorical, and the whole refugium stuff might need a separate video as well, because we never really get into what exactly the deal is with that thing.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's what I was going to ask you too, because there's a couple different, like, because the aerosol like kettle thing and stuff, there's like kind of a almost at least those two examples where there's like a kind of utilitarian aspect to the motherhood, like where it was more like to fashion a tool more so even than to you know what I mean? It wasn't about like having a kid.
Yeah, yeah, which is weird because if a female god impregnated, I mean, sorry, if a male god impregnated a female, I don't know what the repercussions would be. I mean, Cotillion takes his mental possession of Apsala as an unforgivable crime for which even
Yeah.
he as a god has to feel bad for.
Right.
So, but we do see female goddesses take extracting the seed, so to speak, of
Yeah.
male mortals and then creating kids based
Yep.
on their seed.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's not, again, it's not because they wanted to be moms or something and they had like an infertile mate or something. It was like, it was very much motivated by like, again, like kind of like a strategic goal. It was like objective driven, right?
Yeah.
And so, which is kind of like a weird aspect to it. And I'm sure that kind of stuff happens out there. You know what I mean? But I don't know.
The only mortal example of a female just ravishing a male and then ending up having his kids is a case that we've discussed already in this
Right.
video. Can you
Yeah.
guess what, Ishka?
Hatan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is to my, if my memory serves me right, that's the only mortal case where a female just has her way with a guy and
Yeah.
ends up having his kids as well in the books.
Well, and that's why I love that's why I love Krupp, right? Because she is the only one who approaches like sex like that, I feel like. And Krupp is the one who actually ends up besting her like sexually for all of her talk about how she was gonna like eat him alive and all that stuff. Then at the end, Krupp's like, yeah, like I'll see you later tonight. And she's like, dude, I'm done. You know what I mean? And I just thought that was the feather in Krupp's cap. Forget getting beat on the head with Brood's hammer. He like walked away from a sexual encounter with Hatan unscathed and actually got one up on her. That's the real test of his prowess there.
Yeah, and that storyline is also an example of why when Erickson uses these things for humor, sometimes he's not being misogynistic. So I don't know if you saw the collab I did with AP and Philip
Yeah. Oh
on
yeah.
oh yeah, of course you did. Yeah, right. Especially the one on AP's channel, the one on the ship where there is a rape scene, and we do discuss it and we talk about how that kind of is actually meant for humor. So this is very similar. The
Yeah.
Haytan Krupp thing is very similar to that in the sense that it is not meant to be offensive towards a particular. It's not meant to mock human suffering or human anguish or sexual assault. It's
Yeah.
just slapstick humor that's
Right.
sometimes played off in this book to give certain characters and certain storylines a certain tone.
Totally. And I loved it. Like Hatan's dope because like he actually bucks the trend, right? There was no like negative connotation about her being totally like free sexually and stuff like that. Like it was never like, oh my God, like there was no slut shaming component to his Hatan's story. I didn't feel like at all. It was just like, hey, here was these two people who were like down for sex, approached it as total conscious adults and went for it. And it was like, and she just had like a competitive, shall we say, kind of a mind frame going into it. And they did that as adults. I love it.
Yeah, and which makes the Dust of Dreams stuff all the more devastating. That the one female character who's really a true free spirit in all senses of the word. I mean, Haytan is brave, she's fierce, she's kind of, she's majestic, she's charismatic, she's fun. So all of that kind of ended up making her the character she was, which was then setting us up for the truly devastating blow of Dust of Dreams.
Totally. Yeah, no, it's brutal. And, that's why for me, I think that there's so many interesting conversations out there that happen, you know what I mean, about like this egregious use of like sexual stuff and all this stuff like that. But, for me, there's like not that much, egregious about it, right? He's showing us stuff. We're exploring these like challenging topics and whatever. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's just, for me, I appreciate having these things in there to think about, I guess, is where I'll leave it. Cause it's like, these are gnarly things that kind of happen in real life. And so, it's that even this idea that there wouldn't be rape and stuff, they always say, or I don't want to say create a straw man, but I have read and stuff that it's like, wow, you have this whole world without sexism, but then there's like these 10 or how many ever rapes they get depicted in the 3.2 million words. And for me, I totally divorce those two things. It's like, you don't need, like rape doesn't come just purely from sexism. Like there's also like a total like power dynamic element to the rape stuff as well. And so for me, I think that they're not inconsistent to have in there. And, Hatan's story is tragic and all the other ones are tragic too, but it's like, I appreciate having to confront that stuff in your own mind. So.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that is the fault of the Malazan fan community itself, because gatekeepers like myself are shunned as bad people. And we are now told that Malazan is for everybody and that anybody can enjoy Malazan. And it's for, whatever. You're not supposed to say this is more complex than the rest. You're not supposed to say that this is not for everybody. I'm sorry, guys, but these books are not for everybody. I mean, the point that you mentioned, a person would be completely justified in saying that these graphic depictions of rape should not be presented in fiction, right? And our counter answer to that, the only logical answer to that, in my humble, okay, maybe not so humble opinion, right, is our counter answer to that is, I'm sorry, but this is a certain type of fiction. You can read escapist fiction if you want to, where you will not get female genital mutilation and ritualistic rape and a woman being tortured and raped in custody and all that. There's plenty of stuff that you can read which is meant for general audiences, where you will not encounter any of those things. But when it comes to these books, when it comes to this series, when it comes to this author, we are exploring some of those deeper themes. And rather than sweeping them under the carpet, the way this particular writer deals with it is by actually showing us the brutality, not by celebrating it, not by sweeping it under the carpet and pretending that this kind of stuff wouldn't exist in such a world or such a war or such a genocide or empire or whatever. And to me, that's the only answer. But we can't do that these days, because now apparently Malazan's for everybody, right? That anybody can just pick up the books and they would all become Erickson's fans. I mean, just look at Mike's read along, right? We have empirical, just look at the number of people who dropped. And I feel bad for all those people who are either shamed or duped or cheated by people like you and I, Malazan fans, into being told that this was for everybody and that they would be able to undertake this journey. I feel strongly about it, because I've seen many people make comments on this, and I've seen many people kind of raise the flag and beat the war drums against quote unquote gatekeeping or whatever. I consider myself a gatekeeper, and I think it's unfair for us to constantly lead other people around by telling them that these books are for everybody. I know that rant has nothing to do with motherhood, but still, I had to get that
No,
off my chest since you mentioned it.
no, I appreciate it because it goes along with the stuff that I was saying. You know, I think that you're kind of, and actually, and this is like to bring it back to the motherhood thing. I love how you always emphasize, I think, which is like the forward or the pre, you know, the kind of introduction in the beginning of Gardens of the Moon, where he tells you like, dude, this is we're going in eyes wide open, and this is going to be a journey, and we're not just gonna, you know, sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya together. Basically, is the kind of moral of the story there. And you know, but to bring it back to the motherhood thing, I think for me that's like what is you know, unless you know somebody who's like specifically gone through like some heinous stuff, you know what I mean? It's like, how else do you kind of explore that stuff as a dude, right? Like we don't go walk down the street and worry about like getting, you know, abducted or whatever. Like, I don't know, in general, I would say that that's like, you know, more of a concern for, so how do you empathize? How do you like, show support, and how do you think about like how to deal with people, you know, like that's why I love the Stani story and her like estrangement from Harlow and stuff. Is, you know, it's not about a judgment, I think, one way or the other. And the people who like, you know, look at Stani's story and like their only takeaway is like, yeah, what an asshole for like abandoning her kid. The whole point is like for us as the reader to go, man, what must that be like to have to like grapple? Like on the one hand, you love the kid, you know, or whatever, you feel like an obligation to the kid. On the other hand, you're like brutally, you know, raped and stuff. And so it's like, how else do you explore stuff like that? And that, you know, issue, how do you and me explore issues of motherhood? You know what I mean? Like I never would have just introspected by like, you know, helping around the house or like picking up the kids from school and doing stuff like that. It's like, you got to think like, you got to try and get into someone's head. And that's the dope part about these books across all aspects, not just the motherhood, but it's like, you're getting into that. What's it like to be a soldier? You know what I mean? It's like, what's it like to do this and that? And, you know, even with the kind of sexism stuff and the rape versus sexism and, you know, all that stuff existing, it's like, what would a world look like? You know, I've thought about that a million times. Like if we had a world that was like more egalitarian in terms of like pay and occupations and stuff like that. Like, I don't think that leads to a world where you don't have like all these rapes and stuff. Like Picker, I think, talked about how she killed her dad, I think, because her dad like sexually abused her. I think it was like just a throwaway like couple lines, but you know what I mean? And that's like not about sexism when the dad, you know, molests a kid and stuff like that. Like shit like that's still going to go on just because it's I don't know. For me, that's why the world's so fascinating, is because you just like get to think about all this crap.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And how else will you feel the trauma? How else will you feel the pain if it isn't described in such a clinical, uncompromising way? So if you look
It
at,
sucks, it's hard to read, but hey.
yeah, I mean, if you look at, as I said in my video many, many months ago, there are hundreds of thousands of girls who are subjected to female genital mutilation, right? Once you're familiar with the story of Felicine the Younger, they will no longer just be a statistic to you,
Right.
right? Once you read the Hayton story, ritualistic rape, and many of these tribes using rape as a weapon of humiliation, that will no longer be a statistic to you, because now you actually, quote unquote, know someone who's been through that. And that is the advantage of a heavy work of literature like this. This is literature, guys. This is not light reading, right? Even if the author of the books tell you that, I'm sorry, but these books are not for everybody, right? And I think it's
Still
quite.
go watch my Malazan is for everybody video though.
Yeah, of course, of course. Please check out Ishkar's video on how it's for everybody. And you can even check out my comment on that, which just says, RIP Beak, we will never forget you, which used to be my comments for all of Ishkar's videos. So I guess that's my major thing to sort of in response to what you were saying, Ishkar, which is that we've got to understand that this is a very heavy journey. This is a very heavy story. And some of these things, so even though you and I cannot relate to it in the sense that a female reader can perhaps relate to it, you and I can still relate to it a lot more now because we've experienced these books, because we've experienced these stories. So while it might be true that we can't truly understand their position, we still have a much better understanding of both our position and their position because we've read these books.
Totally. We've inched closer together. So
it's always inch by
that's the
inch,
key.
you know.
Yeah. So no, it's good stuff. And, you know, I think that I get a lot out of it, that it's all about what you take back to your normal life. And then, you know, you can go back and kind of have better relationships because you're more eyes wide open about what the other person might've gone through and stuff. And just more conscious and deliberate about your own actions. It's for those introspectors. If you're afraid to plumb your own depths and think about crazy issues, then you're probably going to like read and have panic attacks. So just go read Mistborn or something. It's a quicker flick through.
Yeah, exactly. And that is for everybody. I can tell you that.
That's right.
Have we missed anything out, Ishka? Any mothers we need to discuss? Any motherhood themes?
Well, I know you just wanted to always find a way to work in the Bauchelain Corbel brooch angle. So I know that you mentioned Amansapor's wife, who he is constantly running away from.
Yeah, so I just like that. I just thought that was how motherhood can be used for comedy as well. The fact that she has multiple kids and none of them belong to Reese, and they all potentially belong to different fathers. One of them is Reese's good friend, who even sort of meets up with him and suggests that Reese goes and works with Bauchelain in the first book. So I just threw that out in our list for fun. It's always nice to mention some of these Bauchelain things.
Yeah, exactly. So and we know guys with wives like that too. So there we go.
Yeah. One last thing. The contrast between Badel and Sin. I was just thinking about this earlier when I was contrasting Sin and Sandalat. So Badel and Sin are both lost children. Badel kinds of comes a full circle and finds a mother and a father. She calls Tavor mother and Fiddler father. Sin never really finds that. They're both two extremely powerful girls, two little girls who are as powerful, almost as powerful as gods, and who sort of, if they'd actually played a role in the final battle, many things would have played out very, very differently. You have one who finds a mother and a father, whose story comes a full circle and she kind of gets a happy ending. You get the other who doesn't really find the mother or the father, and she ends up being burnt by her own power.
Yeah, it's gnarly. And so you get to see kind of the other side of the equation, right? For of the parentage or whatever. And for me, the BADD stuff is really cool because she is just a straight up badass. I like the Sin and Grub stuff too, but you know, that's the kind of harsh reality that's out there, right? Is that you kind of have these kids that have, you know, get a raw deal basically, right? And they're like forever jacked up, and no matter what they try and do, it's like those wounds run so deep, and she never really is able to bounce back. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And so for me, I think that's all the more you know, kind of justification or advocacy for, you know, the kind of adoption angle of it, right? Because like, if you know, that's when you need people to take those kids in and kind of, you know, so that they have the benefit of you know, a good life, like somebody like my sister had, or like the failed one that Harlow gets put into. So it's all just those ones are gnarly, but those two are like, should be in the top 10 for just ultimate badasses. So we'll have to revisit those two again at some point.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to her brother as well, because we know Shard's around in Dust of Dreams, and I think he's in the list of characters on top of book 10 as well. But does he die? Is he still around? Because it kind of looked like he had his own storyline with Sin, because he had joined the Bridge Burners as well. Kalam meets them and he rescues them and he kind of takes them away. And,
and they do that assault on that base and whatever. And
and then we never find out what happened to Sin's brother. He's just one of the bone hunters, but we never see him after Dust of Dreams, but we never hear that he dies either.
Right. And like, you know, it's a kind of a contrast to the Orphantal Vorlat thing, because for all intents and purposes, her parents were dead for her. You know what I mean? And she's like ridiculously uber powerful, but she had this like brother there that kind of took her under wing and whatever the whole time, who himself was like super jacked up, obviously too. But that could have made all the difference too. Forget having parents. If that brother could have just helped keep her grounded, that might have helped.
Yeah, too bad there's no brothers there when I come to that. Have we missed anything out, Ishka?
We touched on Scalara a bit, but I think that's that same kind of thing that we talked about with Stani. I think those are just really parallel.
She deserves her own video as well, because there's a lot more to her than just motherhood. She has a very unique story in House of Chains. She has a very unique story in The Bone Hunters. And then she has a unique story in Toll the Hounds as well, where she's a spy addict in one. She's struggling. She's a mother struggling with her pregnancy and the fact that she's going to have a child from her kind of previous rape and all that in the other one. And in Toll the Hounds, it's all about her kind of coming to terms with turning over a new leaf and starting a new life. And she even thinks Barathol's left on the ship with spite. And she turns around and Barathol's right there. So she kind of has a happy ending as well. So she deserves her own video. I will do one on Scalara somewhere down the line for sure.
Yeah, she's a badass character.
Yeah. So do you have anything to add, Ishka?
No, I would just say, hey, keep up the good work, even just throughout the course of this video with your, parallels with Kalava and, and all of that stuff, and Stani and the Gruntle connection, the literal and metaphorical killing of Gruntle by these moms. I learned a lot, and that's why I enjoy the channel so much, and why I'm just so grateful that you had me on.
Ishka, you are the reason many of us exist. You're certainly the reason that this channel exists. So thank you once again. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Ishka and I do these collabs a lot. So whenever they're spaced in sort of too narrowly in between each other, maybe once in a while, we can do one on this channel as well. But
definitely,
this is going to be extremely weird for me to say, but please subscribe to Ishka's channel. Right. I mean, not that it's going to make a big difference, right? He almost has 5K subscribers at this point, and I don't even have 1,000. But yet, guys, come on, let's show him what we're made of. Hopefully, there's some kind of Asian non-Western spike in Ishka's viewership, right? So
let's get it.
Thank you, Ishka. Guys, I'll see you guys soon. I just hit stop record, right, Ishka?
Yep.